Let's go out to the rail yards of Paris and look at the life of a typical French worker. This man riding around on the turntable is called Jacques Dupont, 32 years old. We picked him because he's fairly representative of the skilled workers of Paris, and also because he's an active trade unionist. He doesn't belong to the Communist Union. He's dissatisfied with wages and working conditions in his job, but he's not looking to Stalin for a solution. He's a member of one of the free anti-communist trade unions. The railways are important to France. That's why one of the first things American aid did in France was to help rebuild the shattered railway system. That's why both communist and anti-communist unions are trying to recruit the railwaymen. Because whoever controls the railwaymen can help or can paralyze the country's economy in its defense effort. The men who service these engines are not very different from American railway workers, except that they work longer, earn less, and are exposed to tremendous political pressure from the right and the left. The communists work hard to influence men like Jacques. Their big talking point is that the French worker is worse off than he was before the war. Well, that's probably true, but Jacques and his buddies aren't looking for a party line. They just want a better standard of living. Let's pay a call on Jacques' wife, Marie, at home in their tiny apartment. Two small rooms, but it's a place of their own and better than most. Many French families are forced to live in rooming houses. Most Paris buildings are hundreds of years old, and so's their plumbing. No hot water. And Marie is lucky to have one cold water tap in the house. She heats water for cooking or washing on an ancient gas stove. Other families are not so lucky and have to cook on tiny alcohol lamps. Food goes into a wooden cupboard. Refrigerators are a luxury item that Marie doesn't even think about. To buy one, it would take Jacques' entire earnings for 6 months. And there's no question of washing machines or vacuum cleaners in homes like these. Leaving the apartment on her way to work, Marie has a 5-flight walk down the spiral staircase. And 5 flights is a lot of steps to scrub. This is where Marie works, a small factory which turns out protective goggles. This setup is fairly typical of many little workshops in Paris. A few women sitting around a table doing most of the operations by hand. It's usual for married women without children to go to work in France. Marie works 8 hours a day and earns the equivalent of about $16 a week. And $16 is a big contribution to the family income, even though it doesn't leave much time for housework and shopping. French housewives spend a good deal of their time at the market since they have to stock in food every day. And it is in the market that the family has really felt the pinch. With the rise in prices, French workers have to spend about 60% of their incomes on food to keep them going, nearly twice the proportion that an American family spends. This market is one of the cheapest in the city. It's here that Marie gets her shopping done, in the early morning or on the way home from work. Some things, like lettuce in season, are fairly cheap. But over the past year, most prices have risen higher in France than in any other country in Europe. When it's a question of meat, prices shoot off the chart. Pork has gone up 40% in 2 years. And a pound of steak like this costs the equivalent of 3 hours' wages for a worker. Many French families can afford to eat meat only once a week. Even hamburger steak is a luxury item. Marie Dupont isn't having any beef today. She crosses over to the horse meat shop. There's nothing unusual about eating horse in France. A lot of French housewives do their shopping under the sign of the horse's head. The cost of living. Shoes cost about half a week's pay. The average worker can afford 1 pair a year. Sweaters for $12, nearly a week's pay for Marie. And she can only look longingly at the print skirts on display at this street shop. Listen again to Joe Heath.
This is a big problem for the French worker and his wife. Prices are rising rapidly and wages are not keeping pace. There was some stability here in 1949 and 50, but in the last 12 months, prices in the shops have risen 30%, and for a lot of reasons, one of which is the large defense expenditure of the French government. The French government is doing many things to hold down prices. However, the average guy on the street don't understand it, and he don't like it.
No, they don't like it. These workers lining up for their pay in the rail yards aren't satisfied. A skilled worker like Jacques makes about $20 a week. An average unskilled worker about $17 a week. There's no room for saving in these men's pay envelopes. It's not just that they can't afford a car or a television set. They can't even afford a new bicycle to take them to work. And a night at the movies with a family is an extravagance. And the worker thinks the tax system is grossly unfair. His wages are taxed at the level of the paycheck, at the same time as businessmen are allowed to pass on their taxes to the consumer. Since the worker is the consumer as well, he feels he has to pay everyone's taxes. Most of these men have the sense to reject the Red Union promises of more pay through violent action. But many of them, like Jacques' buddy Pierre, reject the other unions too. It's a shock to count your pay and find it doesn't cover the bills. Jacques is in favor of action through the free trade unions. Pierre is skeptical about the whole business. Here's another American unionist who's been working on these problems for the U.S. government, the president of the American Newspaper Guild, Harry Martin.
Under the Benton Amendment to the Mutual Security Act, Congress recognized that the economic and military aid to our allies should be used in such a way as to encourage the growth of free enterprise and free trade unions. That gave us a clear directive to discourage cartels and monopolies and to help, however we can, the non-communist trade unions. The free trade union is the best means of obtaining for the working man his share of the benefits of recovery, defense and productivity programs which the American government has sponsored in Europe. And that's why American labor has placed men like myself from its own ranks in the administration of our overseas aid program, so that we can help our friends among the working peoples of the Allied countries in their struggle for a better, a freer, and a more peaceful